Good evening. A lot of you I've already met during the day, and we spoke about Myanmar a little bit. So today I'll just take a little bit of time to talk about my personal journey. So it's not going to be very heavy or very legal. It's going to be very personal. A few weeks ago, I embarked on my first trip to Myanmar. I didn't know what it was going to be like. You can barely research anything on Google. This is one country that I struggled doing research on. I had the real good fortune of getting to know Robert before that. And it was a very funny story. We had done so much rule of law work prior to this that people who thought of Myanmar and who thought of what Myanmar needs right now thought of us. And they called us. And they said, I know someone, and he needs help, and he probably needs, a little bit of guidance from you guys. Can I connect you? And I said, great, connect us. And then we were connected. And then, I began planning my trip to Myanmar. And it was a 2-week trip. Robert told me, don't think you can do anything in 3 days. I landed in Yangon. It was it's a clean city. I was really impressed. It's orderly. I loved it. And I didn't expect that as well. I was a bit hesitant. I thought I needed a bodyguard or something. But it was great. I landed there, and I went in Yangon. I met with law students, people who are taking LLMs, LLBs there as well. I spoke to them, looked at their library. Maybe they have one cupboard there with maybe 10 books. Got a little bit sad looking at that, and became resolute. I thought, okay, we need to help them. And then went on to Naypyidaw on a 6.5-hour car ride. And then I met with Robert. And Robert nicely, introduced me to a lot of people. Naypyidaw is the capital, city. And when I was there, I met with people from the legislature, people from the Attorney General's office. And then, I met with Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. It was an amazing experience. I was really intimidated. Robert will tell you how many times I panicked in front of him because she was so intimidating. I would see her from far away, and that I keep saying that energy. I can't describe it other than saying she's got this energy, and she walks around the room, and everybody just is glued to her because she's so outgoing. And straight to the point. So she comes to you. She doesn't wait to be escorted. She doesn't wait to be, taken care of. She comes to you and holds her hand out and says, "Hi, are you here for something? Are you one of the trainers?" And and she just does that. And that was great. I was really intimidated. I saw her talking to senior people representing aid agencies. Giving Myanmar a lot of money. Usually people are nice to them, but she was very matter of fact, asking really solid questions like, well, what else? And what are we going to do here? And what are we going to do there? And let's sit down, let's have a discussion. So every single meeting that I saw her in, it was a working meeting. It wasn't a high level, let's shake hands and, pose for photographs kind of session. And then it intimidated me further because I was supposed to have a 30-minute conversation with her. And Lex's next mission was to find out how we can help. There was so much I didn't know, so much I was guessing about, but, I thought, okay, let's do this. And so we had that really nice conversation. She was very keen about making laws accessible to the Burmese people. So we had discussions about what do you do when people are not literate? It's really easy for LexisNexis to say, print something and then distribute it. That's what we do, right? We can say that we are experts in creating content, but we had a real good brainstorming session about making them consumable to the Burmese people, not necessarily just legal practitioners, but the people. So we have a few projects in mind. That meeting inspired me. Robert will tell you she's all about women's power. Her chief of staff is a woman. She's all about, the woman can do this, and women can do that. And thank God thank God I went there, and I was a woman, and I'm a woman, so, I was thinking to myself, okay, I have one thing going for me. But we had a really nice conversation, and it was really, really inspiring. And then I went back to Yangon and met with the Myanmar Lawyers Association. So this trip showed me one thing, that everyone is eager to embark on the law reform journey. Many people may not know how to do it. Many people welcome help. Sometimes there's too much help going in. Maybe we need some sort of structure, but the will is there. The will from outside Myanmar is there. The will from inside Myanmar is there. And I think, it is only right that we play a part as well. And I'm happy to announce that we will be playing a major part in that. Now, I'd like to introduce Robert. Robert spoke well about law reform today. And I said to him, today you need to make it really, really personal. So tell us lots of stories that will entertain us as well. But Robert has been great. He is really, really passionate. Again, of course, he gets exposure to Dosu, which means you can't not be passionate about law reform in Myanmar. But I happily am eager to introduce Robert to you tonight. Robert.
So with an introduction like that, what can I do now? She told me, Gaythri told me, this has to be both humorous and moving. And by the way, you're not allowed to have any notes with you on stage. So here we go. Let me just firstly say that I had never heard of Gaythri back in June. And you can imagine, my day job is as a commercial arbitration lawyer in Hong Kong. I spend my time going around looking for work. I want those big, high-value cases. Suddenly, over the last year, I've had the great privilege of being Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's lawyer. And in that capacity, you have people contacting you all the time. And I mean, some of these people are great. Some of them are just going to waste your time. And you have to learn to be selective. And so when Gaythri came through on the phone, I didn't know what to expect. My secretary said, this lady from LexisNexis really wants to speak with you. I think it's important. And I was like, oh, not another one. And she won me over. She persuaded me on a phone call that she was serious, that they could add a lot of value, and that they weren't just for profit, but also delivering rule of law in Myanmar. And I'm pleased to say that all the signs are very positive on that front. So it's a great privilege and honor for me to be here tonight to say a few words before you eat. And I am very conscious that you're probably getting hungry. So I was told to speak for 20 minutes. I think that's over-ambitious. I'm going to keep it much shorter. But I've had a very enjoyable time this evening sitting with Judge Nico from the Netherlands here. And he asked me, how on earth did you become Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's lawyer? So I thought, I would use that as the theme for my little talk now. And I should start by saying, I don't look very Burmese, but I am half Burmese. If you saw my dad, you would believe he looks completely Burmese and is. And I grew up in the UK. I had a very, very British upbringing. When I was at university at the LSE in London, it coincided with Daw Aung San Suu Kyi going back to Myanmar, becoming prominent, and starting to try to save the country from where it had got to. And when I was at university, there was nobody on this earth who I admired and looked up to more than her. And for me, the absolute ideal job of any in the whole world would be to advise Daw Aung San Suu Kyi on legal affairs. And so this is a short story about, how you can be very, very lucky, I guess. So I had a very English upbringing. Right after university, I took the chance to go and visit Myanmar. This was in '91. My father, who's a very sensible guy, said, don't go there, Robert. It's far too dangerous. Life's cheap in Myanmar. They may not let you out. And of course, being a young, hot-headed individual, that just encouraged me to go. I rushed off, couldn't wait to get my flight tickets. I went over to Bangkok and I applied for my visa there. And in those days, it was still quite a process. And my father had been denied visas many, many times because having left the country, he was viewed as somehow not being loyal, not wanting to stay there. So we weren't sure. I had no confidence that I would be successful in my visa application. But anyway, it took a few months. Eventually, I did get notice from the embassy in Bangkok that, yes, I'd got a visa. So I went and picked up my visa, I got my flights, and I flew to Myanmar. And I'd never been there. I didn't speak the language well. I took the Myanmar Airways flight. There weren't too many choices in those days. This was 91. And I arrived at the airport. And in those days, it was still basically the old British colonial terminal building that was left. And it's very run down in those days, not much to look at. You came down off the plane, came down onto the tarmac, and I walked across the tarmac. And as I came across the tarmac, there were literally 20 or 30 people calling out, "Robert, Robert." And I could see these bright parasols. It was very, very sunny, very hot day. And my dad's extended family had all come to welcome me. And, I'd never met them before. This was my aunts and uncles and cousins. And they were just so happy that anyone would come back from overseas to visit in those days. It was such an isolated country. And so I met them. They immediately whisked me off. They gave me a house to live in. This is a guy who's just fresh out of university and law school. So to have your own house with a servant, this was too much. This was beyond my dreams. And they took me out for a very, very fine welcome meal, welcome Robert to Rangoon. And as Gaythri knows, I'm a troublesome vegetarian. I don't eat fish, don't eat seafood. It has to be proper vegetarian. And of course, they didn't know this. And so welcoming someone who has been overseas for so many years, you want to really show them hospitality, huge amounts of meat on that dining table. And I have to confess, it's the only time in my adult life when I have knowingly chosen to eat meat because I thought I cannot offend them after this kind of warm welcome. So there I was sort of chatting away and having to chew on a bit of chicken and sort of swallow it down. And it was very uncomfortable for me, but I managed it. And so that was my very, very warm introduction to the country. They took me on tour. So literally we did a tour of the whole of the country, and about 10 or 12 members of my family came. We went mainly by train. And it was interesting in those days, if you traveled by train, you would hear the noise of rocks and pebbles hitting the train. And I asked my cousin, why is that? What's happening? And she said, well, trains are seen as a sort of symbol of government. So people don't like trains. They'll throw things at us. So anyway, I laid low on the train, but I had a very good trip. It all went smoothly. We saw the beauty of Pagan. We saw Mandalay and all the cities, all the towns, the ancient capitals around Mandalay. We went to Inlay Lake. We saw the fishermen there who row not with their arms but with their legs. So, it's hard work, but they're very good at it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful country. And I completely fell in love with it. And, I had my training contract lined up in London. I had a job there with a good law firm. And boy, did I not want to start that job. I wanted to stay in Myanmar. I wanted to be there for the rest of my life. I wrote to every British company that was then trading in Myanmar, and that wasn't too hard because I think there were only about 12 of them. But I wrote to everyone, and not one of them was interested in me. And thank God for me, because it would have been a career-limiting move. So I had to go back to the UK, start my career there, do my training. But what it encouraged me to do, and what I'm eternally grateful for, is it encouraged me to come out to Asia. So as a young trainee solicitor, I came to Hong Kong in '93. I came for 6 months. During that 6 months, I visited Myanmar 3 times, which was very efficient use of your holiday allowance. And then I had to go back to London And as soon as I was back there, I was looking for jobs out here. And so as soon as I qualified, I came back to Hong Kong. And in those days, there was a direct flight from Hong Kong to Myanmar on Myanmar Airways, or as it used to be known, the Banana Airline, because that was the in-flight meal you got, a banana. And I visited Myanmar many times in the 90s, and my love of the country just continued to grow. I then moved back to London, worked there for 5 years. I came out here again in 2003, and I've been here since then. And during the sort of 7 or 8 years from 2003, I would visit occasionally, but not often. And then I visited again late 2010. I could start to see, you could see there were some changes coming, not major, but some changes. Then I visited again late 2011, and it was really changing. There were loads of foreigners, for one thing. Basically, I used to have the privilege of staying at the Chatrium Hotel, which used to be the Nico, and they would always upgrade me to a suite, and it would always cost me, $70 or something pretty reasonable. When I went back in late 2011, I was, having to use my influence to get in. I have to say, I've been here many times before, don't you remember me? And finally, they'd give me a very, very standard room for $150. And anyway, so then I started thinking, well, this is the time. Now it's finally happening. And I spoke to my youngest aunt, Auntie Titi, and I hope some of you have the chance to meet this lady at some point. Auntie Titi used to irritate me so badly because she's very short, incredibly bossy, would treat me always as though I was a child. This was from the first trip onwards. She would always, Robert, you can't do that. You can't go out. You have to stay in. We'll take you out when we want. It was all like that. But I said to Auntie Titi, actually, I can see things are changing here. I'm interested in playing a role. Do you think there's something I could do? Arbitration's my field. With all this foreign investment coming, perhaps, I could run a training course on arbitration. And boy, did I just have to sit back and let her do all the rest. She went out, she went down to, she dragged me along to the Chamber of Commerce, and she, compelled the head guy at the Chamber of Commerce to meet with me. And she said, this is my nephew, Robert. He's the world-leading expert on arbitration, and you need to know all about it, and your members need to know all about it. And so, cutting a long story short, we did do a little seminar on arbitration, and it turned out to be, a really good turning point. And this was not long ago. It was May 2012. And I was very fortunate to get support from the ICC, the Hong Kong International Arbitration Centre, and the Singapore International Arbitration Centre. And so we put on this seminar. And while we were there, we went to speak with the Attorney General and also with the Minister for Industry. And we were basically talking to them about the importance of the country signing up to the New York Convention on the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. Now, you may think, oh, God, we've reached the dry part of the talk. But actually, in my view, this is important. I said to them, I think this is at least as important as any foreign investment law you may be considering. Because no foreign investor is going to be comfortable investing hundreds of millions of US dollars here if they don't know how disputes are going to be resolved and if they don't have the option of resolving disputes offshore. And we got a reasonable reception, as you expect. They said, yes, we understand, that makes sense. And we were saying, well, when's it going to happen? And that's when you get a, slightly more reserved response, shall we say. And so we took that away. We thought, well, there's some work to be done here, but we've made a good start. And it was on that trip that we met someone who has been very instrumental in all of my good fortune. And it was a gentleman I'd never met before, but had asked to meet many times. It's an uncle of mine called U Win Tain. And as with any terrible situation or terrible regime, it's divisive. So in my family, my Uncle Tain had chosen to sort of go along with the regime and had become the Director General of the Election Commission. And that's a great job. When you don't have an election for 20 years, that's a nice, cushy number. And Uncle Tain is a great guy. And I don't, for one second, criticize him for making that decision, because he had to look after his family. And I think anyone faced with the absolute nature of the decisions there would be inclined to go down the road he went down. But his elder brother, Uwintain, took the opposite path. He had been to the leading military defense services academy. In fact, he's a couple of years older than the president. He's now in his early 70s. And when Aung San Suu Kyi came back to the country, he rapidly decided that she was the best and most likely leader of the country to take the country forward and really help the country prosper. And so he firmly supported her, and as a result of that, spent the next 20 years in prison. And as an ex-military guy, was subject to some of the most inhuman and terrible treatment you can imagine. And I say that only fleetingly, because the good thing is he's come out of it and he's still strong and happy. So we met him on that trip. I had this little delegation of arbitration figures with me, and I'd never met Uncle Wintain myself, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And Uncle Tain was there too, so I thought there might be a bit of family tension. I really didn't know how it was going to go. And Uncle Wintain, very short guy, absolutely charismatic, bubbly, cheerful. And we were asking him, how do you manage this after what you've endured? Solitary confinement for years on end, being moved around the country so your family don't know where you are, so you can't be visited. And he said, look, it's very, very simple indeed. If you're going to have 20 years in prison, you have to have an extremely good sense of humor. And I do. And that was his secret. He laughed, he was outgoing, he was engaging, and he held that little group, completely rapt, and was brilliant. And, for me, it was such a fabulous moment. But anyway, moving forward, I was starting to write more about rule of law in Burma. I'd organised some conferences and was fortunate to get very, very good support with those. And this uncle, U Wintain, sent some of the things I'd written to Aung San Suu Kyi. And I was given an audience with her about a year ago, roughly a year ago today, I would say. And you show up, and, Gaythri was, not really giving you the full picture. I mean, when she went to meet Aung San Suu Kyi, her knees were rattling. She was so scared. And I was having to say, don't worry, Gaythri, it's going to be fine. I'll see you through this. But of course, I'd been through the same experience myself when I first went to meet Aung San Suu Kyi. I'd prepared very thoroughly. I went in to explain what I did, who I was, how I might help. And I didn't need to do any of that, because she is very commanding, as Gaythri said. She walked into the room, and when she walks into the room, you know she's arrived. She's got a very, very meaningful gait, and she takes command. And she says, Robert, it's very good to see you. What are you doing tomorrow? And of course, I'd been planning to leave the day after tomorrow, but I quickly adjusted my plans. She said, would you travel with me to Naypyidaw? And we will talk a little bit about this new foreign investment law the government's bringing in, and I would like your guidance on that. And so, having met her on a Sunday, I found myself flying with her on the Monday. And it wasn't quite as easy as all that, because I went to the airport separately from her, and I was waiting in the lounge, and I could see when she arrived, because basically everyone who was in the lounge rushed out. And there was lots of people going, Dorsu's here, Dorsu's here. And so, I grabbed my bag and I rushed out and I tried to follow. I could see roughly where she'd gone. And, she went up some steps and disappeared into a private room. And by the time I got there, there's about, 7 or 8 guys outside the room. And I said, I've got a meeting. I'm supposed to be traveling with Dorsu. And the guy sort of looks down his list, and he must have already known. He said, well, there's nobody on this list. And I said, no, I'm serious. I'm traveling with her. And he's like, I don't think so. And of course, these are in the days after that chap swam across to her house. So, now they're a little bit more savvy about these insane foreigners. But anyway, I got my passport through. I said, please just show my passport. And so they took the passport inside, and immediately I was ushered in. And I was found myself the next minute, with Aung San Suu Kyi, flying on a plane with her, discussing the scenery below us, and trying to sound normal. And it's been a dream. As I said earlier, for me, this is my absolute dream job. I believe passionately in the country. I believe passionately in her ability to lead the country forward. She's coming in for a lot more criticism these days in the international news media. I personally think a lot of it is, deeply unjustified. She's very open about her ambitions. She's made clear that she's a politician. She's made clear she wants to be the president of the country. And I think there is nobody better qualified to lead the country forward. I'm conscious that now maybe I'm being too political. So let me just say that I'm also conscious that she chairs the Parliamentary Committee on Rule of Law, which is why we're all here. And if there's anybody working hard to try to re-establish rule of law after 50 years of appalling, terrible military dictatorship, she's the person. And so Gaythri wanted her here tonight. I said, I don't think that's going to happen. You're going to get something that's nothing like as good. But this was it anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for listening. It's great to have your support. And please do continue to think about Myanmar and ways in which you can help us. So thanks a lot.